That should last you a week, my husband said with a laugh, tossing $100 onto the table before heading off on vacation with his mother, my mother-in-law, leaving me alone with 3 kids. Oh, and by the way, he added at the door, the house isn't yours anymore. We sold it. Guess you'll have to find somewhere else to live. I just smiled. My husband and his mother still had no idea what surprise was waiting for them at the airport. Hello, dear friends. Please tell us in the comments which city or country you're watching from. It's always interesting to see where our viewers are. Enjoy the story. I woke up to the sound of the front door slamming shut. That was his new way of saying, I'm leaving. He used to close it quietly. Now he made sure the whole house shook. The clock on the nightstand read 6:20. Outside, the November rain had turned the street into a mirror of gray puddles. I sat up, wrapped myself in an old blanket, and listened to the silence. Only the soft breathing of my kids came from the next room. Greg was gone to work, or whatever he called work these days. Lately, he'd become a stranger, angry, silent, glued to his phone. I had stopped asking where he went at night or why he came home after midnight. In the kitchen, the weak light flickered over the table. A $100 bill lay there with a short note in his messy handwriting. That's for the week. Don't waste it. I stared at it. $100 for 3 kids for groceries, gas, bills, and he was going on vacation. Not with me, with his mother, Helen, the woman who never thought I was good enough for her son. I poured myself coffee and sat by the window. The house was old, a single-story place left to me by Grandma Agnes, who'd lived here almost 50 years. The kitchen was narrow, the paint on the walls cracked, the heater worked when it wanted. But it was mine, my only security. The kids were still asleep. Ethan, stubborn and quiet. Sophie, who always drew in her sketchbook, and little Ben, barely 3. I looked at them and promised myself no one would take this roof from them. My phone buzzed with a text from Greg. Don't call. I'm on the highway. Everything's fine. Fine? He had thrown $100 on the table and left with his mother for a 2-week trip to Mexico. Last night he'd told me he was tired. Tired of being broke. Tired of the noise. Tired of us. I didn't reply. I opened my laptop instead and pulled a brown folder from the drawer. Inside were screenshots, receipts, printed messages. I'd started collecting them weeks ago, ever since the night I borrowed his phone. At first, I thought I'd find another woman. What I found was worse. There was a chat with Helen. The buyer's ready. The closing's on the 25th. Just make sure Laura doesn't find out. Papers are done. The lawyer's solid. Been helping me for years. They were going to sell the house. My house. Forge my signature, take the money, and disappear. I saved every message, every number, every file. Then I checked his banking apps, hidden accounts, thousands of dollars saved behind my back. I didn't cry. I sat there in the kitchen, drinking cold coffee, planning. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and daycare, called my boss at the grocery store, said I was sick, and drove downtown to a real estate attorney's office. Someone's trying to sell my house without me, I told the receptionist. What can I do? She looked up from her screen. You can file a title fraud alert at the county recorder's office. That'll stop any transfer until you approve it in person. I wrote down the address and went straight there. The clerk behind the counter was an old man named Mr. Johnson. He adjusted his glasses, looked over my ID, and said, "It'll take about 3 days. After that, no one can touch this property without you." 3 days. That would give me time. When I drove home, the sky was the same dull gray as the pavement. The kids' drawings were still taped to the fridge, and Greg's coffee mug sat in the sink. I looked around the house and whispered to myself, "You picked the wrong woman to steal from, Greg." That night, I added one more page to my folder, a copy of the fraud alert receipt, and placed it on top of the pile. The folder was getting thicker, and so was my resolve. 2 days passed like fog. Greg didn't call, didn't text again. Helen posted pictures online, wide beaches, hotel pools, fruity drinks with tiny umbrellas. I saw them through a fake account I'd made months earlier. She was smiling in every photo, always next to Greg. Her caption read, "Family time, finally." Family. I almost laughed. Every evening I sat at the same kitchen table, checking my folder, making notes. The fraud alert was now active. No one could sell the house, but that didn't mean they'd stop trying. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. The next morning, I drove downtown again. The county building smelled like old paper and rain. I asked the clerk if any documents had been requested on my property. He typed something, squinted at the screen, and nodded. There was a title copy printed 2 weeks ago, signed by, Gregory Mitchell. My stomach tightened. Did he bring anyone with him? The man looked unsure. Could have been his mother. I remember her perfume more than her face. That was enough. I thanked him and walked out into the drizzle. My hands were shaking as I started the car. They were already preparing everything. Helen had probably found someone who could fake signatures, someone experienced. I called Valerie. We'd known each other since high school. She worked at a small law firm, the kind that handled divorces and real estate issues. When she answered, her voice was calm and steady, the opposite of mine. "Val, I think Greg's trying to sell my house with forged papers." "You think or you know?" "I have screenshots, messages, even names." She was silent for a second. "Bring everything. Now." I drove straight there. Her office was in an old brick building near the courthouse. The waiting area smelled like coffee and printer toner. Valerie met me by the door. Tall, blonde hair in a bun, same sharp eyes she had back in school. We sat in her office. I placed the folder on her desk. She flipped through the pages slowly, reading every message. "Jesus, Laura," she muttered, "they're not even trying to hide it. They think I won't fight back." She kept reading, her face getting more serious with each page. When she reached the screenshot of the conversation about the lawyer, she stopped. "This name, Boris Ilyich?" "Yes. Sounds foreign. Could be an alias." Valerie nodded. "Or just some sleazy notary who'll sign anything for cash. I know a few who operate like that. Let me make some calls." While she stepped out, I stared at the rain crawling down the window. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Years of working 2 jobs, raising kids, trying to keep peace in a house that was already cracking. Valerie came back 10 minutes later, holding a notepad. "Found him. Name's Barry Ellis. Used to be a licensed notary public. Lost his license for signing off on fake deeds about 3 years ago. Still runs an office out of a strip mall on Kearney Street. So he's still doing it. Apparently, if Greg and Helen went to him, he'd do the paperwork for a few $1,000s. Cash only. Can I talk to him?" Valerie hesitated. "If you do, record everything, but don't go alone. I'll be careful." I drove there the next morning. The strip mall looked half abandoned. A pawn shop, a nail salon, a place that sold vape supplies. Barry's office was wedged between them. No sign on the door, just taped letters. Legal services. Fast and easy. Inside, it smelled of cheap air freshener and dust. A thin man in his 70s sat behind a desk stacked with folders. His suit looked slept in. "Can I help you?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," I said softly. "A friend recommended you, Helen Price. She said you handled her property papers a few years ago." His eyes flicked up. "Helen, huh? I remember her." "I need the same thing," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I can't be here for the signing, but I need the sale done fast. You understand?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "And whose name is on the title?" "Mine." He smirked. "You want to sell your own house but not be there. Sounds familiar." I waited. He looked around the room, then lowered his voice. "It'll cost $2,000 cash. I make it legal on paper. Nobody asks questions." I had my phone recording in my open purse. His words were clear, his voice calm, practiced. "What if someone checks the signature?" I asked. "They won't," he said. "Been doing this for 30 years. No one's caught me yet." That was all I needed. I stood, pretending to think. "Let me get the cash and come back." He nodded. "Sure, but don't take too long. The market's hot." Outside, I stopped recording and leaned against the car. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anger. I called Valerie and told her everything. "Got it all on tape," I said. "Every word." "Good," she replied. "Now it's time for the police, fraud division. They'll know what to do." That evening, after the kids went to bed, I sat in the living room surrounded by quiet. The house creaked softly, the way it always did after rain. On the table lay the brown folder, thicker than ever. Screenshots, statements, the recording, evidence of every lie. I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "They wanted to steal everything from me. Now I'll take everything from them." Tomorrow I'd go to the police. Tomorrow the fight would start. The next morning began like any other, except for the weight in my chest. I woke before sunrise, packed Ethan's lunch, tied Sophie's shoes, kissed Ben's head as he clutched his toy truck. Every movement felt heavy, rehearsed. I smiled for them, but my stomach twisted at the thought of what was coming. After dropping the kids off, I drove straight to the police station. The gray building stood at the end of Maple Avenue, cold and square. The flag out front barely moved in the wind. I parked, sat in the car for a minute, and whispered to myself, "You're not the victim here. You're the witness." Then I walked inside. The front desk officer, a woman with sharp eyes and a coffee in her hand, asked, "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to file a fraud report, real estate fraud." She raised an eyebrow. "Property title or mortgage?" "Title. My husband and his mother are trying to sell my house without my consent. I have proof." The officer looked surprised but calm. "Wait here. Someone from the fraud division will come get you." 10 minutes later, a man in a plain gray suit appeared. Early 40s, clean shave, tired eyes that had seen too much paperwork. "Detective John Reed," he said, shaking my hand. "Let's talk in my office." His office was small. Old blinds, 2 chairs, and a desk buried under folders. He gestured for me to sit. "So, start from the beginning." I told him everything. About the fake sale, the screenshots, the forged signatures, the notary who'd offered to fix things for $2,000 cash. He listened, barely interrupting, taking notes in a small black pad. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "That's a hell of a story, Mrs. Mitchell." "It's not a story," I said. "It's my life." He nodded slowly. "And you have the recording?" I opened the brown folder, slid my phone across the desk, and pressed play. Barry Ellis's voice filled the room. "It'll cost $2,000, all legal on paper. Nobody asks questions." When it ended, the detective sat silent for a moment. Then he said, "That's solid. More than most people bring us. So what happens now?" "I'll open a criminal file. Fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft. We'll need your written statement and copies of everything. After that, we can contact the county recorder's office to make sure the fraud alert stays active." "Can you arrest them?" "Not yet. They haven't completed the sale. In cases like this, intent is tricky to prove until they actually try it, but—" He looked at me over the file. "If you're willing, we can set up a controlled sting. Catch them in the act." The words made my pulse quicken. "You mean pretend nothing's wrong and let them try?" "Exactly. We'll monitor the transaction. Once they hand over the fake papers, we move in. No one gets hurt, and the evidence sticks in court." I hesitated. "That sounds dangerous." "Only if they suspect you. Just keep acting normal." I looked down at my hands. They were clenched into fists. I hadn't even noticed. "I'll do it." Detective Reed smiled faintly. "Good. That's courage most people don't have." He spent another hour helping me fill out forms. He photocopied everything from my folder, gave me a case number, and handed back the originals. Before I left, he said, "Go home. Keep your distance from them, and don't mention the police to anyone. I'll be in touch." Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves swirled across the parking lot. I climbed into the car and sat there, staring at the building's glass doors. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to relief. When I got home, the kids were still at school. The silence felt strange, heavy. I made coffee but didn't drink it. Instead, I pulled out my phone and opened social media again. Helen had posted another picture. This time she was in a sun hat, glass of champagne in hand, the ocean behind her. Her caption read, "Finally living the life I deserve." I wanted to write something back, something sharp. Instead, I took a screenshot and added it to my folder, Evidence of Arrogance. That evening, Valerie came by. She brought takeout and a bottle of wine we didn't open. We sat in the living room, the TV on mute, the kids asleep upstairs. "So, they took the case," she said. "They did. Reed's planning a sting." Her brows lifted. "That's big. You sure you can handle it?" "I've handled worse. I just need them to pay for what they tried to do." Valerie studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You're stronger than you think, Laura." "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to feel it. Just keep going." She left after midnight. I locked the door behind her and stood by the window for a long time. The street was empty, just the faint glow of a streetlight reflecting on wet asphalt. In the morning, I woke to a message from Reed. "Case accepted. Operation in planning. Stay calm. We'll update soon." I set the phone down and looked around the kitchen. The same cracked tiles, the same hum of the old fridge. Nothing looked different, but everything had changed. For the next few days, I kept my head down. Work, kids, home, routine. But under it all, a storm waited. Each time my phone buzzed, I expected it to be the call that ended this nightmare. On the 5th night, it came. "Mrs. Mitchell, it's Detective Reed. We've confirmed your husband and Helen are moving forward with the sale. The buyer's a real person, a couple they found online. We'll need you to temporarily remove the fraud alert so the transaction can proceed." I froze. Remove it? That sounds insane. "It's the only way to catch them with evidence strong enough for a conviction. We'll be there the whole time. Once they hand over the papers, we arrest them on the spot." I was silent for several seconds. "And if something goes wrong?" "It won't. We've done this before." My voice trembled. "All right, I'll do it." "Good. Go to the recorder's office tomorrow and file a cancellation. Tell them everything's fine now just to keep it off record. Then act normal. Don't change your routine. They can't suspect you." After he hung up, I stood there in the kitchen, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles went white. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "You wanted a game, Greg. Let's play." The next morning, I went to the county office, smiled at the clerk, and said what Reed told me to say. "I filed the alert by mistake. Everything's fine now." The clerk hesitated but nodded. "All right, we'll remove it today. Should be effective by evening." By the time I left the building, the sun had come out. Warm light spilled across the pavement. For the first time in weeks, it felt like the world was holding its breath with me. That night, I tucked the kids in and sat at the table again, the brown folder open before me. The evidence was ready, the trap was set, and somewhere far away, Greg and Helen were probably packing their bags for their next trip. They had no idea that this time, someone was waiting for them at the finish line. The next morning felt colder than usual. A sharp wind rattled the windows as if the house itself knew what was coming. I made pancakes for the kids, smiled through breakfast, and listened to Ethan talk about a school project. Sophie showed me her new drawing, a crooked little house with a big red heart above it. Ben just smeared syrup on his cheeks and laughed. I looked at them and felt my throat tighten. They had no idea what their father was about to do. After I dropped them off, I parked in front of a small diner and called Detective Reed. "It's done," I said quietly. "The fraud alert is off." "Good," he replied. "We'll monitor any document activity from now on. Don't confront them if they show up early. If they call, answer normally. Keep them calm." I hesitated. "You really think they'll go through with it?" "They're too far in to back out. Once greed starts running, it doesn't stop." I ended the call and sat there for a while, watching the waitress inside refill someone's coffee. Everything looked so ordinary. People laughing, cars driving by, life moving on. I felt like I was behind glass, watching a world I didn't belong to anymore. That evening, as I folded laundry, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Laura, it's Helen." Her voice was syrup-sweet, the same tone she used when pretending to care. "I wanted to check on you and the kids. How are things?" "Fine," I said, keeping my tone flat. "Greg's been worried, you know. He said you seemed distant lately." I nearly laughed. Distant? He was the one halfway across the country lying about work. "I've just been busy." "Well, maybe it's for the best. A little space helps sometimes. Greg and I will be back soon. We'll have a surprise for you." The word surprise made my stomach twist. "That's nice," I said quietly. She paused. "You sound tired, dear. Try to rest. You'll see. Everything will turn out for the better." She hung up before I could answer. I stared at my phone, then at the half-folded pile of clothes. My hands were trembling again. I wanted to throw the phone across the room, but instead I forced myself to keep folding. 2 days later, Detective Reed called again. "They've scheduled the sale for Friday morning, 11 o'clock. We'll have plainclothes officers at the notary's office. When they hand over the fake documents, we'll move in." My heart started pounding. "Friday?" "Yes. We'll need you to stay home that morning just in case they try to call. We don't want you anywhere near the scene." I exhaled slowly. "All right. Just make sure they can't talk their way out of it." "They won't," he said. "This time they'll face real consequences." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt louder. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about 17 years of marriage unraveling into this. When the sun rose, I got up, brewed coffee, and sat by the window. Across the street, Mrs. Parker was walking her dog. She waved. I waved back, pretending everything was fine. By evening, I had packed a small bag. Documents, flash drives, copies of everything. If something went wrong, I wasn't staying here. I would grab the kids and disappear for a while. On Thursday afternoon, Valerie dropped by. She looked exhausted but determined. "Reed told me it's happening tomorrow," she said. "Yeah, 11 sharp." She nodded, sitting down. "You'll be okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me still hopes Greg will change his mind at the last minute, but people like him don't stop until they hit the wall." Valerie sighed. "He already chose his side. Now let him deal with it." We talked for an hour about everything except the sting operation. When she left, the house felt emptier than ever. That night, I tucked the kids in and kissed them goodnight. Ethan asked, "Mom, when's Dad coming back?" I froze for a second. "Soon," I said softly, "but things might be a little different when he does." He looked at me with the same serious eyes Greg used to have when we first met, back when promises still meant something. I couldn't sleep again. Around midnight, I sat at the kitchen table with my brown folder. I opened it and ran my hand over the papers. The story of betrayal captured in screenshots and receipts. Every lie, every message, every dollar they'd hidden. I'd read it all so many times that the words had lost meaning. Now they were just evidence. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed again. A text from Greg. "Hope you're doing okay. Don't stay mad. I'll make things right soon." I stared at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He really thought he could destroy me and then ask for forgiveness like it was nothing. I typed a reply, then deleted it. Silence would hurt him more than anything I could say. When dawn finally came, the sky was heavy and gray. The house was still. I packed lunches, brushed Sophie's hair, zipped Ethan's backpack. Everything felt unreal, like moving through fog. At 9, I got a short message from Reed. "We're in position. Stay calm." At 10:30, "They're here." I stared at the phone for a full minute. My palms were damp, heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. At 10:58, "Entering office now." I couldn't breathe. I paced the kitchen, back and forth, counting the seconds. Then, at 11:03, the phone rang. My hands shook as I answered. "Mrs. Mitchell." Reed's voice was steady. almost too calm. "It's over. We've got them both. Your husband and his mother are in custody." I sank into a chair. "You're sure?" "They were caught signing the papers. We have everything. Recordings, documents, witnesses. They'll be booked today." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Relief flooded through me, followed by a wave of sadness so sharp it hurt. Reed's voice softened. "You did the right thing, Laura. Most people would have looked the other way." "I didn't have a choice," I whispered. "They left me none." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall. The clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The world kept moving. Somewhere downtown, Greg was sitting in a holding cell, and Helen was probably still talking, trying to charm her way out of it. But for the first time in months, I felt free. I closed the brown folder and whispered, "It's done." The house creaked in the wind. Outside, the sky finally broke, and soft rain began to fall. Steady, cleansing, unstoppable. Rain kept falling the rest of the day. It tapped against the windows like a slow heartbeat, filling the silence that followed Detective Reed's call. I sat at the kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, trying to process what had just happened. Greg and Helen were under arrest. The house was safe. The nightmare was supposed to be over, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt hollow. By late afternoon, Valerie stopped by. She didn't knock. She just walked in, dripping wet, holding a manila envelope. "They processed them," she said, shaking water from her hair. "Greg and Helen, both charged with attempted property fraud and conspiracy. Reed said the paperwork's airtight." I nodded but said nothing. She placed the envelope on the table. "Copies of the official statements. You'll probably have to testify, but don't worry. The evidence is solid. They won't get out of this one." I traced the edge of the envelope with my thumb. "He used to fix my car on weekends," I said quietly. "Now he's in handcuffs." Valerie sighed. "You can love someone and still know they deserve what's coming." I looked out the window. Water streaked down the glass, blurring the streetlights into glowing rivers. What happens next? "They'll probably post bail tomorrow. It won't be cheap, but with what's frozen in their accounts, they won't get far. Reed filed a request to monitor their movements. You and the kids are protected." I let out a shaky breath. Protected. I liked the sound of that. Valerie gave me a small smile. "You did it, Laura. You stopped them." When she left, the house felt too big. I walked into the kids' room. Sophie was asleep, one arm around her stuffed rabbit. Ethan was pretending not to be awake, phone glowing under the blanket. Ben snored softly, his hair sticking to his forehead. I brushed it back and whispered, "It's all right now, baby. We're safe." That night, I dreamed of a door slamming over and over again, louder each time, until it turned into thunder. I woke up sweating, the rain still tapping the window. The next morning, Reed called. "They were arraigned this morning," he said. "Both released on bail. Don't panic, it's normal procedure. They have court restrictions, can't contact you or come near the property." "Can't contact me," I repeated, staring at the ceiling. "You don't know Greg. He'll find a way." "He won't," Reed said firmly. "We're watching them. Any violation and they're back in custody, but I need you to stay alert." I thanked him and hung up. That afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Greg's handwriting. My hands trembled as I tore it open. "Laura, you didn't have to do this. I was trying to fix our lives. Mom just wanted what's best for us. You made a mistake, but I still love you. Tell the kids I'll come back soon. No apology, no regret, just manipulation wrapped in fake tenderness." I ripped the letter in half, then again, until it was nothing but paper dust. The phone buzzed soon after. A message from an unknown number. "You ruined everything." I stared at it for a moment, then blocked the number. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anger. That evening, Valerie came again with takeout. "He texted you?" she asked when I told her. "Yeah, but I blocked him." "Good. Don't respond, don't engage. Let the police handle it." We ate quietly for a while. She looked around the room, then said, "You should consider changing the locks, just in case." "I already did," I said. "Yesterday." Valerie smiled faintly. "Of course you did." For the next few days, life tried to crawl back to normal. I went back to work at the grocery store. The manager greeted me with a hesitant smile. People whispered behind my back. Small-town gossip traveled faster than truth. "Did you hear? Her husband tried to steal her house." Some pitied me. Others just found it entertaining. I didn't care. I focused on the kids, routine, stability, breakfasts, homework, bedtime stories. Each small act felt like rebuilding a wall they'd tried to tear down. One evening, as I was closing the store, a car pulled into the parking lot. I recognized it immediately, the old gray truck Greg used to drive. My heart stopped. He got out, rain soaking his jacket, and started walking toward me. I froze. Then my phone buzzed. Reed's number. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said before I could speak, "Greg's GPS pinged near your workplace. We're on the way. Don't talk to him." I glanced up. Greg was 20 feet away, expression calm, almost gentle. "Laura," he called out, "please, just hear me out." I stepped back. "You're not supposed to be here." "I just need to explain." "Explain how you tried to sell the roof over our kids' heads?" He flinched. "It wasn't like that. I made a mistake. I cut him off. "You thought you'd take everything and run. With your mother." He sighed, shaking his head. "She pushed me. You know how she is." "That's not an excuse." He took another step closer. "Laura, please, we can fix this." Before I could respond, flashing blue lights filled the parking lot. Reed's car screeched to a stop, followed by another cruiser. Officers stepped out, weapons lowered but ready. "Gregory Mitchell!" Reed's voice boomed through the rain. "You're violating a restraining order. Hands where we can see them." Greg froze, eyes wide. For a moment, I saw panic. Then he looked at me, mouth trembling. "You really called them?" I didn't answer. Reed grabbed his arm, cuffed him, and led him toward the car. "You should have stopped when you had the chance," I said quietly. He didn't reply. The rain drowned his words anyway. Reed turned to me. "You okay?" I nodded, though my legs felt weak. "Yeah, I'm okay." "Good. We'll file this as a violation. It'll make the case stronger. Go home. Stay inside tonight." When I got home, Ethan met me at the door. "Mom, are you crying?" "No," I said, wiping my face. "It's just the rain." That night, for the first time, I slept without nightmares. The sound of the rain no longer scared me. It soothed me. Every drop felt like washing away what was left of him. In the morning, sunlight broke through the clouds. The house smelled like coffee and pancakes again. Sophie ran through the kitchen giggling. Ben trailed after her, and Ethan sat by the window, quiet but smiling. I looked around at my small, imperfect world and thought, we survived. The courthouse smelled of dust and coffee. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, landing in long stripes across the wooden benches. I sat on one of them, hands folded tightly in my lap, trying not to look at the man 2 rows ahead, my husband. Greg wore the same gray suit he'd worn to job interviews years ago. It didn't fit him anymore. He looked smaller in it, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow. Helen sat beside him in a cream jacket, her hair pinned up, face blank like a mask. She kept whispering to him, and he nodded without looking back. Detective Reed was at the side of the room talking to the prosecutor. Valerie sat next to me, calm as ever, holding her notepad. "Remember," she whispered, "you just tell the truth. Don't add emotion. Facts are enough." The judge entered. Everyone rose. My pulse thudded in my throat. The clerk read the charges: attempted property fraud, falsification of legal documents, conspiracy to commit theft. Each word hit like a stone. When Greg's lawyer stood, his voice was smooth, almost rehearsed. My clients acted under misunderstanding. They believed the property was jointly owned. There was no intent to defraud. I almost laughed. Jointly owned? The deed had my grandmother's name, then mine. Greg's name had never been there. but I stayed silent. The prosecutor rose. Your Honor, the evidence shows otherwise. We have recorded proof of the defendant's plan to sell the property using falsified documents. We also have witness testimony from the notary who accepted a bribe to complete the sale. The judge nodded. Proceed. Reed was the first witness. His testimony was steady, professional. He described the sting operation, the evidence collection, the arrests. When he played the recording of Barry Ellis, the courtroom fell silent. Barry's voice echoed through the speakers. $2,000 cash. I make it legal. Nobody asks questions. Helen's face went pale. Greg shifted in his seat but didn't look up. Then it was my turn. The bailiff led me to the stand, swore me in. My hands trembled slightly as I sat down. The prosecutor smiled reassuringly. Mrs. Mitchell, please describe when you first realized your husband and mother-in-law were planning this. I told the story from the beginning. The $100, the trip, the messages, the fake notary. I kept my voice steady, just like Valerie had told me. The room was so quiet that every word felt amplified. When I finished, the defense attorney stood. Mrs. Mitchell, he said, you claim your husband planned to sell the house behind your back. But isn't it true you and he were experiencing financial stress? That perhaps he was only trying to help? I looked straight at him. Help? By forging my name and selling my home while I was feeding our children on his $100? That's not help. That's theft. He opened his mouth but closed it again. The courtroom murmured. After that, Valerie's documents were shown. The title deed, my grandmother's will, the screenshots of Greg's messages. Everything lined up perfectly. When the judge called for recess, Reed caught my eye and gave a small nod, a signal that things were going our way. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing the crisp air. Valerie joined me. You did great, she said. I just told the truth. That's usually enough. The trial lasted 3 more days. Each one was a blur of testimonies, paperwork, and silent stares from Greg. He never spoke to me directly, but once during a recess, our eyes met. For a moment, I saw the man I used to love. Not the liar, not the thief, just the man who once built a crib for our first child. Then the image shattered. On the 4th day, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the presented evidence and witness statements, this court finds both defendants guilty on all counts. Helen gasped. Greg's shoulders sagged. The judge continued, voice firm and final. Sentencing will follow next week. Until then, bail is revoked. The deputies led them out. Greg turned once, looking at me. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile either. When it was over, Reed approached me. Justice takes time, he said quietly, but it gets there. Yeah, I said, just wish it didn't cost so much to reach it. He gave a small nod and left. Valerie walked me to the car. You know, a lot of people freeze when faced with something like this, she said. You didn't. I couldn't afford to freeze, I replied. My kids needed me. At home, I sat with Ethan, Sophie, and Ben on the couch. I told them the truth. Not the ugly details, but enough. Dad made a mistake, I said. He has to fix it now. Ethan asked quietly, Is he coming back? I hesitated. Maybe someday, but not soon. Sophie leaned against me. We still have the house, right? Yes, sweetheart, I said, kissing her hair. We still have our home. That night, after they went to bed, I walked through the house in silence. Every creak, every chipped wall, every old photograph. It all felt heavier, but somehow more alive. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that I had fought and won. A week later, at sentencing, Greg got 2 years in state prison. Helen, who had arranged most of the paperwork, got 3. Barry Ellis took a plea deal for cooperation. The judge called my courage commendable. I just wanted it to be over. When it was finally done, Valerie hugged me outside the courtroom. Go home, Laura. Rest. I don't even know what that means anymore, I said. Then start figuring it out, she replied. So I did. I went home, opened all the windows, and let sunlight flood every corner. The air smelled clean, free. On the table lay the brown folder, now closed for good. I picked it up, walked outside, and dropped it into the trash bin. The paper fluttered once before it disappeared into the dark. For the first time in years, I felt something that wasn't anger or fear. It was quiet, fragile, but real. The beginning of peace. A year passed before I saw him again. Seasons turned quietly, measured in school report cards, grocery lists, and birthdays that came and went without drama. The house stayed ours, steady as a heartbeat. The kids grew taller, louder, happier. I learned how to laugh again without checking if anyone was listening. Then one morning, a letter arrived from the state prison. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. It wasn't from Greg. It was from the prison counselor. Your husband is scheduled for release in 6 weeks. He has listed your address as his intended residence. Please confirm or provide an alternative. My stomach tightened. 6 weeks. After everything, he wanted to come back here. I called Valerie first. He's not setting foot in that house, she said immediately. We'll file a restraining request extension. He can't use your address without your consent. We drove to the courthouse that same afternoon. The clerk recognized my name before I even finished speaking. Within an hour, the paperwork was done. Reed, now promoted to lieutenant, approved the request personally. He's free to rebuild his life, he said, just not near yours. The following weeks moved fast. Ethan turned 16 and started helping me with small repairs around the house. Sophie joined art club. Ben learned to ride a bike, wobbling down the driveway while yelling, "Look, Mom!" Life felt solid again, like concrete setting after a storm. Then came the knock. It was late Saturday morning. I was folding laundry, radio humming softly in the background. When I opened the door, Greg stood there. No warning, no guards, no handcuffs. He looked thinner, older, the confident arrogance gone from his face. A faint scar ran along his jaw, probably from a fight. His voice was soft. "You changed the curtains." I didn't answer. He shifted awkwardly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just needed to see the kids." "You can't," I said. "You know the order." "I know. But Laura, please, just once. Let me see them from the porch. I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just 5 minutes." His voice cracked, and for a second I almost saw the man I used to know. But then I remembered standing in that courtroom, hearing him lie under oath. "No," I said simply. "You made your choices." He looked down at his shoes, then back up. "I lost everything." "You tried to take everything," I replied. We stood there in silence. Behind me, I heard Ben's small voice. "Mom, who's that?" Greg's eyes filled with tears. "Ben?" I turned. "Inside," I said quietly. "Go watch TV." The boy obeyed, glancing back once. Greg's voice trembled. "He doesn't even recognize me." "He remembers what matters," I said. "Who stayed?" He nodded slowly, staring at the ground. "I'm sorry, Laura. I know it doesn't mean much, but I am." "Maybe," I said. "But sorry doesn't rebuild trust, or time, or family." He took a shaky breath. "I just wanted to tell you I got a job offer in another state. Construction. They let me start fresh. I'll be gone by next week." "Good," I said quietly. "Go start over. Just don't drag anyone else down this time." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're stronger than I ever thought." "No," I said. "I just finally stopped being afraid." He turned and walked away down the driveway. No goodbye, no glance back, just the sound of gravel under his boots fading into the distance. When the silence returned, I shut the door and leaned against it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This time, it was release. The last thread between us had finally snapped. That night, after the kids went to bed, I sat by the window and watched the porch light flicker. The house felt different, lighter somehow, as if it knew he was truly gone. I opened my journal for the first time in months and wrote one line. He came back, but I didn't break. A week later, a letter arrived. It was short, handwritten, no return address. "Laura, you were right. I don't deserve to come back. Take care of them. Take care of yourself." I folded it and placed it in the drawer beside the old photo albums, not as a keepsake, but as a reminder of what I'd survived. Spring arrived early that year, the yard filled with small yellow flowers, the kind that grow without anyone planting them. The air smelled clean like rain and cut grass. One afternoon, while hanging laundry on the line, I watched the kids play in the yard. Ethan chased Ben with a water gun. Sophie sat on the porch steps, sketching them both. I felt something bloom quietly inside my chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just peace. Valerie came by that evening with 2 coffees. "So, how does freedom taste?" she asked. "Like fresh air," I said, "and coffee that doesn't get cold while you're crying." She laughed. "You're really done with the past, huh?" I looked toward the sunset. "The past's done with me, that's enough." When she left, I walked through the house one last time before bed. The floors creaked the same, the pictures still hung crooked, but everything felt new. I paused at the window. The porch light burned steady now. Outside, the world was calm. Greg was gone, and I didn't need him to come back. Summer came warm and easy, the kind of season that slips in quietly, filling every room with sunlight. The house, once a battlefield, turned peaceful again. Windows open, curtains moving with the breeze, the scent of fresh paint and cut grass drifting inside. For the first time in years, nothing felt temporary. I started working extra shifts at the grocery store, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The manager had promoted me to supervisor, said I'd earned it through hellfire. I laughed at that, but deep down, it felt true. Ethan got his first summer job washing cars at a small garage down the road. Every evening he came home smelling like soap and gasoline, proud of the few bills in his pocket. Sophie sold her drawings online, little prints of houses, families, and sometimes a woman sitting by a window with a coffee mug. She said it was her favorite character. Ben spent his afternoons in the yard building forts from cardboard boxes. Our world was small but alive. One Friday, Valerie stopped by with takeout. She leaned against the porch railing, watching the kids chase each other across the lawn. "You ever think about selling this place and starting over somewhere else?" she asked. I looked around. The weathered wood, the patched roof, the crooked mailbox with faded numbers. "I used to," I said. "Now I think about staying." She smiled. "You're one of the few people I know who turned a house full of pain into something worth keeping." "It wasn't the house," I said quietly. "It was the people inside it." She nodded and changed the subject. "You should consider night classes, management training maybe. You've got a head for it." "Maybe I will." Later that evening after she left, I sat on the porch alone. Fireflies blinked above the grass, soft and slow. I remembered the nights I'd sat here terrified, waiting for the sound of tires in the driveway, wondering what kind of mood Greg would be in. Now the silence was a comfort, not a threat. A week later, I got a letter from the county recorder's office. The title of the property had officially been transferred solely under my name. The final paperwork from the court had gone through. No more restrictions, no shared ownership, no joint signatures, just mine. I held the letter in both hands and laughed. Not the shaky, nervous laugh I'd used in the past. A real one, deep and clean. That evening, I made spaghetti, poured 2 glasses of juice for the kids, and told them, "The house is officially ours, forever." Sophie clapped. Ben shouted, "Does that mean we can paint my room green?" Ethan grinned. "It already looks like a jungle." "Then we'll finish the job," I said. We spent the next weekend repainting. Walls turned from beige to soft blue, then green, then pale yellow in the hallway. We found old pictures tucked behind furniture, a wedding photo, birthdays, smiles that felt like they belonged to strangers. I boxed them up and slid them into the attic. Some things didn't need to be burned, they just needed to stay out of sight. At night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit by the window and write in my journal. 1 small page each day. Not about pain anymore, but about progress. A new recipe that worked. The first tomato from the garden. Ben learning to spell family. In September, Reed stopped by unexpectedly. He'd been promoted again and was moving out of state. "Thought I'd say goodbye," he said, smiling shyly. "You're the reason we're standing here free," I told him. He shook his head. "No, you are. We just followed your lead." I thanked him, and he left, his cruiser's lights flashing faintly as he drove off into the dark. For a moment, I stood there, realizing that the last piece of that old life was finally leaving, too. By fall, the yard was full of orange leaves. Sophie's art had started selling better online, and Ethan had saved enough to buy his first used car. A dented but reliable sedan that smelled like oil and old pine air freshener. We took a photo together that day. The four of us standing by the car, smiling awkwardly but genuinely. Valerie said later it looked like a new beginning. She was right. Months later, when the first snow came, I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders. The world was white and still. I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fear, the courtroom, the letters, the rain. It all felt distant, like an old movie you stop halfway because you already know how it ends. I didn't hate Greg anymore. I didn't forgive him either. I just didn't carry him with me. He had become what he always should have been. A lesson, not a shadow. That night, as I tucked Ben into bed, he asked, "Mom, what does it mean to start over?" I smiled. "It means you take what's left and you build something better." He nodded thoughtfully, eyes already closing. "Then we started over, right?" "Yes," I whispered. "We did." I turned off the light and stood for a moment, listening to his steady breathing. Outside, snow kept falling, soft and endless. I walked back to the living room, sat by the window, and opened my journal. On the last page, I wrote, "This house began as a wound. Now it's a heartbeat." The clock ticked quietly in the corner. Somewhere in the night, the heater hummed to life. I closed the notebook, smiled, and whispered the words I had waited years to say. We're home. Winter melted slowly that year. The snow outside turned soft, gray and tired, like an old memory finally ready to fade. I spent most mornings with coffee at the kitchen table, watching sunlight crawl across the floorboards. The world had gone quiet in the best possible way. Then, one afternoon in March, I found an envelope wedged between bills and flyers in the mailbox. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. The pen strokes were careful, almost hesitant. I froze. I hadn't seen that handwriting in more than a year. Greg. I stood there for a long time before opening it. The paper smelled faintly of cigarettes and prison soap. Laura, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. Not in a dramatic way, just leaving for good. I know you'll never want to hear from me again, but there are things you deserve to know, things I was too proud to admit when it mattered. Mom's the one who pushed the sale, but I agreed. I thought I was fixing our life, getting us out of debt, giving us a new start. I told myself it was for the kids, but that was a lie. It was about me, about proving I could still control something in a world that had already passed me by. Prison gives you a lot of time to think, too much time. I saw my reflection in every man who'd ruined his own home, thinking he was saving it. That's the punishment, really, the silence that won't stop talking. You were right to stop me. You were right about everything. I used to think you were weak for staying through all the bad years. Now I know that was strength I never had. Tell Ethan I'm proud of him. Tell Sophie her art made me cry once when I saw it online. Tell Ben. I'm sorry I wasn't the kind of father he deserved. I won't come back. You don't need to look over your shoulder anymore. Keep the house. Keep your peace. It's the one thing I can give you now. Greg. I read the letter twice, then a third time. My eyes burned, but no tears came. The words felt both heavy and light, like something long overdue. I folded it carefully, placed it in the same drawer as the old court papers, and closed it. Some ghosts didn't need to be buried, they just needed to be filed away. That evening, I told Valerie. She listened quietly, then said, Closure doesn't always look like forgiveness. I don't forgive him, I said, but I think I finally understand him. Then that's enough. The next morning, the sky was pale blue. I decided to walk to work instead of driving. The air smelled of thawing earth and damp leaves. At the corner of Maple Street, I passed the small diner where I'd once sat, terrified, calling the police for help. Now it was just a building, nothing more. Inside the grocery store, my co-workers smiled. One of them asked if I'd consider applying for assistant manager. I said I'd think about it. Maybe I would. That afternoon when I came home, the kids were in the yard again. Ethan was tuning his car, Sophie painting something on a wooden board, Ben chasing a soccer ball through puddles. Their laughter echoed down the street. "Dinner in 20, I called out. "Okay, Mom." I stood there watching them, realizing how far we'd come. Once, every decision I made came from fear. Fear of losing, fear of anger, fear of not surviving. Now every choice came from calm, from strength. After dinner, I tucked Ben into bed. He still liked to talk before sleep, little rambling thoughts about school or bugs or dreams. "Mom," he said suddenly, "are we going to move someday?" "Maybe," I said, "but not because we're running away. Only if we want to." He nodded. "Good. I like this house." "So do I." When he fell asleep, I went to the porch. The night was quiet, stars sharp and cold above the roofline. Somewhere out there, Greg was gone for good, maybe rebuilding, maybe disappearing. But that story wasn't mine anymore. Mine was here. The porch light, the laughter behind the windows, the sound of wind against the trees. A week later, another envelope arrived. Smaller, official looking this time. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another bill, but when I opened it, there was a single document inside, a final notice from the state declaring the fraud case closed. All legal matters resolved. Property title verified. I smiled. The last thread of the past had been cut clean. That weekend, we planted a tree in the backyard, a young maple, thin but stubborn. Ethan dug the hole, Sophie painted the stake, Ben watered the roots until the ground turned muddy. When we finished, I stepped back and looked at it. Fragile now, but one day it would tower over the house. "This tree's ours," I said. "It'll grow here as long as we do." Years from now, it would tell the story better than any words could. A family that broke apart, then built again. That night, before bed, I wrote in my journal for the last time. There was a time I thought the worst thing that could happen was losing everything. I was wrong. The worst thing is living in fear of that loss. And the best thing is realizing you survived it. I closed the journal, placed it in the drawer beside Greg's letter, and turned off the light. The house settled around me, creaking softly, alive. Outside, the young tree bent in the wind but didn't break. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like someone who had finally come home. Time has a strange way of softening sharp edges. The noise of the past faded until it became background hum, like the distant sound of a train you only notice when it's gone. Days no longer felt like battles to survive. They felt like ordinary life. And for someone who had once lived on fear and adrenaline, ordinary was a miracle. The house aged kindly. The paint on the porch peeled in thin curls. The maple tree out back stretched taller each spring. I replaced the kitchen tiles one weekend, then the window frames. Every repair felt like a small act of defiance against everything that had tried to tear this place apart. The kids grew faster than I was ready for. Ethan turned 18, got his diploma, and enrolled in a local community college for mechanics. He was still quiet, still careful with words, but his eyes had that steady confidence that comes from knowing you've been through fire and come out stronger. Sophie's art filled the walls, portraits of people, of rooms, of light hitting glass in ways that made me stop and stare. She said she wanted to study design. Ben was in middle school now, full of jokes and energy, always running somewhere barefoot. I'd kept the same job, but now I managed the store. The days were long, but they were mine. Customers came and went, familiar faces, small talk about weather and prices. No secrets, no hidden fears, just normal rhythm. Some evenings, when the store closed, I'd walk home through the neighborhood. Maple Avenue looked different now. New paint, new families, a new coffee shop on the corner. Sometimes people would wave, not knowing anything about who I used to be. And I liked it that way. Valerie visited less often now. She'd moved 2 towns over, started her own small practice. When we did meet, we'd sit on the porch like old friends who didn't need to fill the silence. "You know," she said once, "you've done something rare. Most people escape their past but never stop running from it. You made peace with yours." I smiled. Peace took longer than war. In early spring, I got another letter. This one official from a law office in Texas. For a moment, my chest tightened, thinking of Greg. But inside was a simple notice. Helen Price had passed away 2 months earlier. No estate, no debts, no requests. It felt strange reading it. The woman who'd once tried to erase me from my own life had vanished quietly, leaving nothing behind but a name in black print. I set the paper down, made tea, and went outside. The wind was cold but clean. I didn't feel anger or victory or grief, just closure. Real closure this time. Weeks turned into months. The rhythm of life settled into something gentle. Saturdays were for pancakes and music. Sundays were for fixing things, or reading, or doing nothing at all. Every once in a while, Greg would cross my mind. Not as a ghost, not as a wound, but as a fact of history. The man who taught me what happens when love turns into control. The man who, in destroying what we had, showed me how to rebuild it on my own. Ethan never talked about him, but I saw glimpses sometimes, in how carefully he counted change, how quickly he noticed other people's moods. Sophie painted a portrait one day of a man looking out a window, his face half in shadow. When I asked who it was, she just said, "Someone who learned too late." Ben, though, was different. One night, as we were cleaning up dinner, he asked, "Mom, do you think people can really change?" I thought for a moment. "I think they can," I said. "But sometimes change comes too late to fix what they broke." He nodded, serious beyond his years. "Then I don't want to wait that long." I smiled and kissed the top of his head. "You won't." That summer, the maple tree bloomed thick with leaves. Its branches stretched far enough to cast shade over half the yard. Sometimes I'd sit under it in the evenings, a book in hand, the air buzzing with crickets. The past no longer chased me. It just existed, folded neatly behind me. In the fall, I took my first vacation in years, just me and the kids. We drove to the coast, rented a small cabin near the water. The ocean sounded like freedom, endless, untouchable. Watching the waves, I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who whispered apologies into the dark, who counted money by candlelight, who kept proof of betrayal in a brown folder. That woman had built this new life with her bare hands. On the last night there, we made a bonfire on the beach. Sophie roasted marshmallows. Ethan played music from his phone. Ben threw sticks into the fire and cheered when they sparked. I reached into my bag, pulled out the letter Greg had written, the one I'd kept folded for years, and held it over the flames. Sophie noticed. "Mom? It's time," I said simply. The paper curled, darkened, and turned to ash. The wind carried it away across the sand. When we drove home the next day, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. The following year passed quietly. No surprises, no courtrooms, no letters, just life, steady and real. I learned how to cook new things, how to sleep without waiting for footsteps, how to smile for no reason. One evening, while watching the sunset from the porch, Ethan joined me. He leaned on the railing, taller than me now, the light catching his face. "You ever think about the future?" he asked. "Every day. What do you want from it?" I looked out at the sky, streaked orange and pink. "Nothing dramatic," I said. "Just more of this." He smiled. "Then I think you've already got it." The years that followed came quietly. Graduations, birthdays, laughter echoing down hallways that used to hold whispers. The house stood through it all, no longer a reminder of what was lost, but a monument to what was saved. And though I never said it out loud, every night before bed I whispered one small prayer, not for forgiveness or revenge, but gratitude, for the noise that became silence, for the pain that became purpose, for the woman who finally learned how to live in peace. It began on a Sunday night in late October when the weather changed faster than anyone expected. By sunset, wind howled across the yard, bending the maple tree until its branches scraped the siding. The local station warned of a severe storm moving in from the west, heavy rain, flooding, power outages. I closed the shutters, filled a few jugs with water, and told the kids to keep flashlights by their beds. Ethan laughed. "Mom, it's just rain. We'll be fine." Maybe he was right. But the sound of that wind reminded me too much of old times, the nights when I'd waited for a different kind of storm to walk through the door. By midnight, thunder cracked so loud it shook the windows. The power flickered, then died. The house went dark except for the pale beam from Ethan's flashlight in the hallway. Sophie came out of her room clutching a blanket, and Ben trailed behind her half asleep. "Everything's okay," I said softly. "We'll camp in the living room tonight." We spread blankets on the floor, lit a few candles, and waited for the rain to ease. It didn't. It pounded the roof like 1,000 fists. Somewhere outside, something heavy crashed, probably the trash cans. But when Ethan looked out the window, his face went pale. "Mom," he said quietly, "the tree." The maple had split down the middle. A huge branch leaned dangerously close to the porch. One more gust and it would crash through the front windows. I felt that old adrenaline return, the same feeling from the night I discovered Greg's betrayal, from the day I faced him in court. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was focus. "Stay here," I said. "Keep the candles away from the curtains." I grabbed my raincoat and went outside. The storm hit like a wall. Wind tore at my hood. Rain needled my face. The tree groaned under its own weight, a low, aching sound. The rope swing Ben had used all summer whipped wildly, wrapping around the trunk. I ducked beneath the leaning branch, grabbed the saw from the shed, and started cutting away the smaller limbs that pressed against the roof. My hands burned, my muscles screamed, but I didn't stop. Then Ethan was beside me, soaked to the bone, yelling over the wind. "Mom, let me help!" We worked together, pushing, cutting, dragging. Finally, with one last crack, the heavy branch slid off the roof and hit the ground with a deep thud. For a second, everything went still. Then the rain softened. The worst had passed. We stood there, breathing hard, drenched, staring at the fallen limb sprawled across the yard. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Better than okay." When we went back inside, the candles had burned low. Sophie had drawn little hearts on the fogged-up window to calm Ben. The power came back a few minutes later, filling the room with warm, steady light. I looked at them, all three of them, and thought how storms used to mean danger. Now they meant proof. We could handle anything that came our way. The next morning, the sun rose sharp and clean. The air smelled like wet earth and sap. We went outside to survey the damage. The fallen branch had missed the porch by inches. The tree, though wounded, still stood tall. Ben ran to it and touched the trunk. "It's still alive," he said. "It always will be," I answered. We spent the rest of the day clearing debris. Neighbors came to help. People who hadn't even lived on this street when everything had fallen apart years ago. One brought coffee, another a chainsaw. By afternoon, the yard was tidy again, piles of cut wood stacked neatly along the fence. Sophie stood beside me, watching the sun filter through the broken tree. "It's kind of beautiful," she said, "like it survived something." I smiled. "Yeah, kind of like us." That evening, Valerie called from her new office. She'd heard about the storm. "Heard your neighborhood got hit pretty hard," she said. "It did, but we're fine. The house held. "Of course it did," she said with a laugh. "That place has been through worse." After we hung up, I made tea and sat by the window. The maple tree's silhouette was darker now, uneven but still proud. For a moment, I thought of Greg again. Not with anger, not even with sadness, but with a quiet understanding. He had been his own storm, loud, destructive, but temporary. The life that followed him was steady, like the air after rain. The years that followed came softer. Ethan finished his studies and got a job at a local auto shop. Sophie's art won her a scholarship to a state college. Ben joined the soccer team, too small for his uniform but running with all the stubborn energy of a survivor. And I finally did what Valerie had suggested long ago. I enrolled in evening classes, management courses, spreadsheets, leadership training. I was nervous at first, sitting beside people half my age, but I learned fast. 2 years later, I became the general manager of the store where I'd once been a cashier. The day they handed me the new office keys, I thought about that first $100 bill Greg had left on the table. How far those few crumpled bills had carried me, through betrayal, through fear, through rebuilding. Sometimes, after long shifts, I'd drive home past the courthouse. The building looked smaller now, less like a place of judgment and more like a chapter I'd already closed. One night, as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, I parked outside the house and sat there, engine off, watching the porch light glow. It flickered once, then steadied. I smiled. Storms still came. They always would. But I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Inside, the kids, now nearly grown, were laughing over something in the kitchen. Their voices drifted through the open window, warm and alive. I closed my eyes, listened, and felt something simple and complete settle in my chest. Peace wasn't quiet because nothing happened. It was quiet because I had finally learned that I could survive anything. The maple tree swayed gently in the wind outside, leaves whispering in the dark. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew the truth. The worst was long gone, and what remained was life, imperfect, fragile, and utterly mine. The years moved gently after the storm, marked not by chaos but by rhythm. Mornings that smelled of coffee, evenings that ended with laughter, seasons folding into one another without fear. I had grown older, though I didn't mind it. Every wrinkle felt like a receipt for survival. The maple tree out back healed slowly. The half that remained grew stronger, branches spreading wider as if determined to prove it could still reach the light. I often found myself sitting beneath it on quiet Sundays, reading or simply listening to the wind. It whispered things I could almost understand. One afternoon in late spring, Ethan came home with news. "Mom," he said, standing in the doorway with grease on his hands, "they're offering me a full position at the shop. Benefits, salary, the whole thing." I smiled. "That's amazing." He nodded, trying to hide his excitement. "I'll finally be able to help with the bills, maybe even fix that old fence." "You already help more than enough," I said. "The rest we'll handle together." He grinned. "You and that word, together. You never drop it." "Because it's what saved us," I replied. A few weeks later, Sophie came home from college for the summer. She looked different, taller, more confident, hair cut short. She carried a sketchbook filled with drawings of places she wanted to see. New York streets, mountain cabins, quiet beaches. "One day I'm going to travel," she said. "Paint everything I can't explain." "You will," I told her. "Just promise you'll always come home between journeys." She smiled. "Promise." Ben was almost a teenager now, growing faster than I could keep up with. He developed a fascination with building things. Shelves, birdhouses, even a makeshift bench from old planks. One evening he came to me holding a small wooden box, uneven but sturdy. "It's for you," he said proudly. I opened it. Inside was a tiny carving of our house. Crooked roof, porch swing, even the maple tree. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "How did you make it?" He shrugged. "Just remembered what it looks like when you smile at it." That night, I placed the box on the mantel beside our family photo. Every time I passed it, I felt something warm spread through me, a quiet gratitude for a life rebuilt from ashes. One afternoon in June, I received a call from Valerie. Her voice carried that mix of energy and calm I'd always known. "Laura," she said, "I'm getting married." I laughed out loud. "About time." "I want you there, you and the kids." "Of course we'll come," I said. The wedding was small, held in a garden just outside the city. Reed was there too, older now, but still with that steady kindness in his eyes. When he saw me, he smiled. "You look like someone who finally stopped fighting ghosts." "Maybe I just ran out of them," I said. He chuckled. "No, you learned to live with them." During the ceremony, as Valerie said her vows, I thought about promises. The ones broken, the ones kept, and the ones we make silently to ourselves. Promises to never go back, to never settle for pain disguised as love, to build peace even when no one's watching. That evening, as music played under the string lights, I saw my children dancing. Ethan with a girl from Valerie's firm, Sophie twirling barefoot, Ben chasing fireflies. They looked happy, truly happy, and I realized that was the promise I'd made years ago, without saying a word, to give them a life that didn't revolve around fear. The next morning, we drove home through open fields glowing gold under the early sun. The car was full of laughter and sleepy yawns. I rolled down the window, letting the wind tangle my hair. The road ahead seemed endless, but for once that didn't feel frightening. It felt free. That summer passed like a deep breath. Work, family, evenings on the porch. Sometimes, when the air was still, I could almost hear the faint echo of who I used to be, the woman who once begged the universe for peace. I wanted to tell her it was coming, but it would take time, that she'd lose everything before she found herself. One night in late August, a soft rain began to fall. I stood at the window, the same one where years ago I'd watched Greg's truck disappear for the last time. The reflection looking back at me was different now, steadier, calm. I wasn't waiting for anyone to return. Ethan came downstairs, half asleep. "You still awake?" "Yeah, just thinking." He joined me by the window. "About Dad?" "About everything," I said honestly, "but mostly about how far we've come." He nodded. "You did it, Mom. You kept your promise." "What promise?" "To make sure we'd never be scared of home again." For a long time we stood there listening to the rain. It wasn't heavy, just soft enough to blur the world outside into silver. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, I took out my journal again. The pages were nearly full now, a story written in ordinary ink about extraordinary endurance. I flipped to the last page and wrote, "I once thought survival was the goal. It wasn't. The goal was living without fear. And I made it here, one day at a time." I closed the book and set it beside Ben's wooden box. Outside, the rain eased and the moon broke through the clouds. Tomorrow would come, like it always did, and whatever it brought, I would meet it the same way I had met every storm, with both feet on the ground, eyes forward, heart steady. Because that was the real promise, not to be unbroken, but to never stop rebuilding. Autumn came again, the kind that painted everything in copper and gold. Leaves drifted across the yard like slow embers, the air crisp enough to smell of wood and rain. Every morning I walked to the bus stop with Ben, who was now nearly as tall as me. His voice had changed, deeper now, but he still called out, "Love you, Mom," before running off. That small sentence, shouted into the morning air, was proof that the world had healed. Ethan had moved into his own apartment a few miles away. He still came by for dinner every Sunday, always bringing groceries, even though I told him not to. He'd sit at the table, eating like he hadn't all week, talking about engines and clients and the coworker he might be falling for. His laugh sounded like freedom. Sophie was in her second year at college now, painting murals for small cafes to earn money. She sent photos of her work, bright colors, open skies, and often, hidden in a corner, a small drawing of a maple tree. I didn't ask if it was ours. I knew. One Friday evening, the house was quiet again, just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I found myself opening old drawers, cleaning out papers that no longer mattered. At the very back of one, I found the tiny carved wooden box Ben had made years ago. I opened it. Inside, where dust should have been, was a small folded note I'd forgotten. His handwriting, shaky and uneven, read, "Don't be sad, Mom. The house loves you too." I smiled. Maybe he was right. Maybe the house really did hold a kind of memory, not of the pain, but of the persistence that came after. That weekend, I decided to host a dinner for everyone. Valerie and her husband came first, bringing homemade bread that smelled like rosemary. Ethan arrived next with his girlfriend, a quiet, kind girl with a sharp sense of humor. Sophie came later that night, surprising us all with a painting rolled under her arm. "It's for you," she said, unwrapping it. It was the house, bathed in sunset light, the maple tree towering behind it. But instead of showing broken windows or chipped paint, she had painted it as it was now, warm, alive, every detail glowing. In the bottom corner, she'd written, "Home, rebuilt." For a moment, no one spoke. Then I hugged her, hard. It's perfect. Dinner lasted late into the night. Laughter filled every room. Even the creaky floors seemed to join in, groaning under the weight of too many happy footsteps. After everyone left, I stood on the porch. The air was cool, the sky sharp with stars. The house behind me glowed with soft yellow light. It looked exactly like Sophie's painting. I thought about how many times I had stood in this same spot, once crying, once terrified, once ready to disappear. Now I just stood there, grateful. Days slipped into weeks. Work stayed steady. Life stayed kind. I'd started mentoring new employees, young women who reminded me of who I once was, nervous, unsure, trying to hold everything together. I told them what I wish someone had told me long ago: you're stronger than your worst day. One of them asked once, "How do you know when life finally gets better?" I said, "When you stop waiting for the next disaster and start enjoying the quiet." That winter, snow returned, thick, soft, and silent. The maple tree stood proud, its branches bare but strong. I decorated the house for Christmas, the same house where once I'd sat counting dollars in fear. Now it was full of light. Ethan helped hang the lights on the roof. Sophie painted handmade ornaments. Ben kept sneaking cookies before they cooled. Valerie visited with her husband, bringing gifts wrapped in gold paper. We played old songs, sang off-key, laughed until our sides hurt. At one point, Ethan handed me a small envelope. "Don't open it until tomorrow," he said. The next morning, after the chaos of breakfast and wrapping paper, I remembered it. Inside was a photo, not a new one, a copy of an old picture I hadn't seen in years. It was from before everything fell apart. Greg, me, and little Ethan sitting on this same porch, sunlight on our faces. On the back, Ethan had written, "We can't change the past, Mom, but we can make it part of what made us stronger." I stared at the picture for a long time. The pain was still there, faint but real. Yet now, it didn't sting. It simply existed, like a scar that no longer hurt to touch. That evening, I walked outside alone. Snow covered the yard in a smooth white sheet. The maple tree shimmered with frost, its shadow stretching across the ground like a quiet guardian. I whispered, "We made it." The wind stirred the branches, scattering a few flakes over me, soft as a nod. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat by the fire with a cup of tea. The flames danced slowly, casting orange light across the walls. The painting of the house hung above the mantel, next to a small framed photo of the kids from years ago. I thought about everything. The fear, the betrayal, the nights I almost gave up. I thought about how the universe had a way of closing circles, not by taking us back, but by showing us how far we'd come. Somewhere out there, Greg was probably still alive, living quietly, maybe even changed. But that didn't matter anymore. The story had already found its ending here, in this room, with this piece. I closed my eyes and listened to the house breathe, the soft creak of wood, the hum of the heater, the faint laughter echoing from dreams upstairs. When I opened my eyes again, I looked around and realized something simple but profound. Everything I had ever needed was already here. Not revenge, not closure, just love, hard-earned and honest. And that, I knew, was what it meant to come full circle. The winter that followed was mild, soft in a way that felt like mercy. Snow came and went, melting quickly under gentle sun. The house no longer creaked from cold. It sighed, content, as if finally resting after a lifetime of storms. The children, though I still called them that, were adults now. The house was quieter during the day, filled only with the rhythm of my own steps and the hum of the old heater. But silence no longer frightened me. It had become my favorite companion. Ethan visited often. He was engaged now, to the same girl he'd brought home that night years ago. Her name was Lily. She had a smile that felt like sunlight and the patience of someone who understood broken things. They planned to marry in the fall, here, under the maple tree. Sophie lived in the city, painting full-time. Her art was starting to hang in real galleries. She sent photos, proud but humble. "It's not fame," she said. "It's just a life I built myself." And that was enough for me. Ben, now 17, spent most of his time tinkering in the garage. He wanted to be an architect. "I'm going to design houses where people feel safe," he said once. "Like this one." Every time I looked at him, I saw both the little boy who carved a wooden box and the young man who'd learned to build from love, not anger. I had my routines. Mornings started with coffee and a walk through the yard, no matter the weather. I checked the mailbox even when I expected nothing. Just the small act of opening and closing that metal door reminded me of the first time peace found me in an envelope. One morning in early March, I found another letter waiting. No return address, again. My pulse quickened for half a second, an old reflex. But when I opened it, I saw a clean, official header from the Department of Corrections. "We regret to inform you that former inmate Gregory Mitchell passed away on February 23rd due to natural causes. No next of kin claim the remains. As his former spouse, you may contact the facility if you wish to arrange final disposition." I sat on the porch for a long time, holding the letter in both hands. The wind moved gently through the bare branches above me. I didn't cry. There was no need. The man who'd once set my life on fire was gone, and the ashes had already settled long ago. That night, I told Ethan first. He looked down, silent for a while, then said, "You don't have to do anything, Mom." "I know," I said, "but I think I should. Not for him, for me." So I called the next day. They said his body had been cremated. There was a small box with his name on it, unclaimed. I asked them to send it. When it arrived, I didn't open it right away. I left it on the table for 2 days, passing by it as if it were any other forgotten package. But one evening, when the house was still, I sat down, lifted the lid, and stared at the simple gray urn inside. No inscription, no flowers, just quiet. I placed it on the porch railing and watched the sunset. The sky burned gold and red, then cooled to blue. "You can rest now," I said softly. "We both can." Then I opened the lid and let the wind do the rest. The ashes scattered easily, carried over the fence, across the field, disappearing into the horizon. It was strange how something that once caused so much pain could dissolve into silence. When I went back inside, the house smelled faintly of cedar and rain. I made tea, sat down at the table, and wrote one last entry in my journal. He's gone now. And for the first time, there's no anger left in me, only peace, the kind that doesn't need witnesses. After that, I closed the journal for good. Some stories, even when they're true, deserve endings quiet enough to keep. The next morning, Ben found me on the porch, reading. "Mom," he said, Ethan called. He wants to move the wedding to early autumn. He said the tree looks perfect now. I looked up at the maple. Its branches were full again, strong and green, reaching higher than ever. That's a good sign, I said. The wedding came sooner than expected. The yard was dressed in string lights and flowers. Valerie officiated. Reed and his wife attended as guests. Sophie painted a mural behind the altar, a glowing sunset over a house that looked suspiciously like ours. As Ethan stood under the tree, waiting for Lily, I saw the boy he once was and the man he'd become. When she appeared, radiant and sure, I felt my throat tighten. Not from sadness, but from the strange, quiet joy of knowing that everything painful had led us here. When they said their vows, I thought of my own, spoken long ago under false promises. Theirs sounded different, simple, unbroken, real. After the ceremony, music filled the air. People danced barefoot on the grass, laughter rising like sparks. I stood aside, watching, the house behind me glowing with warm light. Sophie found me and slipped her arm through mine. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," I said. "I'm where I was always supposed to end up." As night fell, the lights flickered under the branches, the wind rustled through the leaves, and the laughter of my children filled the yard that had once been silent. When everyone left and the house grew quiet again, I stepped outside one last time. The maple tree stood tall, silver in the moonlight. I whispered to it, "We did it." The wind moved through the branches like a voice answering back. Inside, I poured myself a final cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the world settle into sleep. The house no longer felt like something I had to protect. It felt like it was protecting me. Before bed, I placed my journal, now complete, inside Ben's wooden box. I closed the lid gently, the same way I'd once closed every chapter that had tried to break me. And then I whispered the last words I would ever need. "Thank you for the storm. It taught me how to build." The light flickered out. The night was calm, and somewhere beyond the window, the tree stood unshaken, a promise kept. If this story moved you, like the video, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.